the best waiver wire pickup, and this may be the most important waiver wire run of the season. Is that more this week on the couch? Ian Hartitz. We're all going to be smiling a lot more after this show. Who can make you smile from the waiver wire this week?
Not sure there's anyone that can get a full smile out of me, Sig, but at least, hanging out on the couch can get me smiling here for a little bit. But I will say, depending on the league size, because at the risk of being the person who, suggests someone, and then all of a sudden I find out he's inexplicably owned in 100% of fantasy leagues, assuming that Roschon Johnson is not going to be out there in your squad, I think we got to figure out how to pronounce Emari Demercado correctly, Sigmund, because we did get a little note today from none other than Cardinals head coach Jonathan Gannon that, whoever we have playing will get their touches and kind of go from there, but he's doing a good job in reference to Emari. So James Conner on IR. We got Keontae Ingram still day-to-day with a neck injury, not completely out of the picture, but look, Sig, it's all fun and games until you get to week 6 and something named Emari Demercado all of a sudden is a usage-based RB2. Could maybe be this year's version of Zonovan Knight. I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
Right. That's great. We can do a chain all the way back to infinity of these running backs who flash for 2 or 3 weeks. But as I was explaining earlier this week on our waiver wire show, Ian, this is not a figure skating routine, your fantasy football season. It's not like you're going to stick all the jumps. You're going to fall. Like I said, it was almost like they allow players out there that can tackle you. You're trying to pull off all of these artistic moves with your draft and your beautiful football knowledge and injuries and misfortune, and you limp through the routine sometimes, but you finish the routine, you get the scores, and everybody's having to limp through their routine, and you're slapping pieces together. You're trying to keep the car on the road, and maybe Emari Demercado could be that guy. And I like mentioning him simply because we often see this. Ian, I think this week's waiver wire run is very much akin to week 2, when there's just so much to sift through that it isn't even a question of how much you're going to bid on this one player that everybody's after this week. It's more like, which situations are you going to target? Which players are you going to target? Are you going to go big and really try to land a Jeff Wilson or land a D'Onta Foreman or even Roschon Johnson if he's out there? Because those players are going to be the most buyed for, or do you stay under the radar and you look for a Demercado? I think that's a good move, and often it ends up being those moves. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and this exact same mindset, man, for like the buy lows and sell highs and stuff. Like I was getting, some crap on Twitter for saying, Alvin Kamara should potentially be a sell high. And it's like, okay, not for every team though. If you did just employ a full like 0 RB strategy, and then Kamara is pretty much your only guy to position at top 24, like, yeah, you should probably keep him. But if you happen to be blessed with several other high performing RBs, I do think it could be at the peak of his value for this season for a variety of reasons. But yeah, man, exactly. So maybe you need more wide receiver help, and someone like Josh Downs all of a sudden is far more deserving of your fab allotment. Maybe you look at your roster and you have 8 guys that you're just like, how on earth am I ever going to bench any of them for something named Emari Demercado? And all of a sudden, a stash like Tajay Spears makes more sense there. So again, usually podcasts only talk for about 60 minutes. We can't exactly go through each and every angle for each and every transaction, but yeah, just trying to, again, not be too lost in the moment, not be too much of a prisoner in the specific weeks, waiver wire hype, and looking at your roster big picture and going from there.
Yeah, I think that I compared it to a puzzle, like doing your Wordle or whatever kind of puzzles you like to do. This week's waiver wire is a puzzle. You try to figure out, navigate through what can help your team the most. Do you need short-term help, long-term help? Do you need immediate help? Which positions? And do you want to emphasize talent over opportunity, et cetera, et cetera? These things, there's a lot of different injuries to sift through to shake out. So let's just step through each one. We can go any number of angles with these, Ian. We can talk about the situation left in the wake of the injury and what the right reaction is to that. We can talk about, hey, here's some potential buy low players or some moves you can make if you lost this guy. And then, like you said, there's also an angle that if you're playing fantasy football, if you're really pretending you're a GM, then the fact that some team out there lost Justin Jefferson, some team out there lost Anthony Richardson, some team lost Devin Achane, some team lost Khalil Herbert, some team lost James Conner, that creates opportunities to make trades. That creates opportunities to look at their roster, look at your roster, see what you can work out to maybe be a win-win. Certainly you want that win on your side. Let's start with the biggest name, Justin Jefferson. This one's rough. And I feel like every time I mention Justin Jefferson, I have to say there is a non-zero chance that we aren't going to see him again this year, right? There's a subplot here. I don't know how to put a number on what are the chances that Kirk Cousins gets traded. I know Will Ragats, R-A-G-A-T-S, A-T-Z, said, hey, remember, Kirk Cousins has a no-trade clause, and he might not feel like learning a new offense. He might not feel like being traded. I mean, this is a real consideration. I don't know about you, Ian, but if you try to simulate, I'm Kirk Cousins, that's tough. That's like picking up static on the radio. So who knows? But if he gets traded, if this team starts to slide, why is Justin Jefferson, who does not have a second contract yet, why is he going to come back? Why is he going to play? So with that in mind, we got Jordan Addison. I think that's where everyone's mind went right away. He's going to be the biggest beneficiary, maybe. KJ Osborne, who's apparently going to slide right into Justin Jefferson's role.
That's how it works.
Right? How should we be shocked if he is up to it and catches 9 or 10 or 11 balls against Chicago this weekend, remember? And then there's, of course, TJ Hawkinson. He might catch 14 balls. There's the running game, which was kind of starting to come to life, has Cam Akers now. And then there's also the possibility that if you take, like Justin Jefferson's the stopper in the bathtub, if you take him out of this offense, then the whole offense just shrinks. And who cares? What do you see in the wake of the Justin Jefferson injury?
Sadly, I don't quite think the offense, hot take here, Sig. I don't think it's going to be humming quite as brilliantly here without one of the best wide receivers in the entire NFL. And it really does suck to see the Vikings, 1-4 this year. They're kind of now on the other side of regression with the one-score games after running so hot, at least in the regular season, with those in 2022. And you look up and to see Kirk Cousins have more passing yards than anyone other than Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, I know just passing yards in them of itself don't tell the whole story with a quarterback, just like barely any stat does. But he really has not been the major problem in Minnesota. Their defense hasn't gotten any better. And even in clutch moments, TJ Hawkinson letting a potential game-winning touchdown bounce off his hands and get intercepted. Other than Justin Jefferson, I just don't think we've seen really any of these other pass catchers hold their weight this season. And that does right now apply a little bit, even though it's early, to Jordan Addison. Thought Matt Hardman had some always great reception perception data on him, just showing that against man coverage, he is going to have to be a little bit better. He's played 5 games. He has plenty of time to get a little bit better, but that would be my big note here, is not to, I guess, look at the leftover production from Justin Jefferson and just say, all right, 33% of that's going to Hawkinson, 33% is going to Addison, another third for KJ Osborne. The pie as a whole, I think, is going to shrink. It's going to take Cousins from really the mid-tier QB1 he's been to far more of a, borderline QB1 guy next to, if not behind, the Staffords and Strouds of the world. Right. And then, yes, upticks for Addison and Osborne, but do either of them become just must start, need to get them in your lineups at all costs? I don't quite think so. As my co-host, just overall friend, I know he's been on this couch plenty of times, Dwayne McFarland has always been pointing out, we don't see guys like KJ Osborne who have struggled their entire career to really demand a high just target rate start to do that once, you take away a good wide receiver from the offense. So I do lean Addison as having the higher ceiling in the long term, but even that, man, just going through the rankings was actually hard for me to get him too much higher than about that wide receiver 20. So Addison, solid wide receiver 2. I think Osborne can give us a few boons as a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 type. Hawkinson might not be pretty, but in full PPR, doesn't have to be. Probably the number 2 tight end behind only Travis Kelce this week.
Yeah, I think the keynote there is this pie is going to get smaller. Addison, I do think this could be one of those, we're maybe looking in the wrong place with Addison, because I don't like to play this game very often, but I think it applies here, Ian. The 2 long touchdowns he has, does he get that open if Justin Jefferson's not out there? Does the defense just forget about him if they're not thinking about Justin Jefferson? And then what do we have? The first
one, Sig, was for sure a blown coverage in week 1. The second one he had against the Eagles, he made a great play, and he's a great player, so we should expect that. But that's a fair point, man. He makes a great play one-on-one against the safety, but with no Jefferson there, probably has a cornerback in his back hip the whole time.
Yeah, and I think another angle here too to talk about, and I think this is a good angle to explore, again, from either direction. There's some uncertainty about when Justin Jefferson's going to return, or maybe, if you're being honest, if he's going to return. Do you think that in a typical redraft league that you should be, before these narratives get dug in and people start really understanding, hey, we don't know what we're going to get from Justin Jefferson. Deal him, trade him for DeAndre Hopkins, right? Trade him for DeAndre Swift. Just in a DeAndre, pick your favorite DeAndre and trade him, right? What I'm trying to say is, you're not trying to trade Justin Jefferson, and I'm putting that line there for a reason, Ian. It's not that you're going to trade Justin Jefferson for Keenan Allen or something like that. It's just not going to happen, right? You're not going to be able to get an elite player for him, but you may get a player that still has a chance to be elite, or at the very least is a strong contributor, and is the kind of name that someone that is, and again, look at the teams that are 5-0 right now. If you have Justin Jefferson and you're looking at your lineup, oh, that's a big blow. I want to cash him in so that I can make the playoffs. And if he comes back and beats me in the playoffs, oh well. Or do you think it's the other side? If you're 5-0, you should be looking at the team that has Justin Jefferson. Which side of trading Justin Jefferson do you like better right now?
Look, if you're going to trade the man, let's make sure we're at least getting the sort of high end, just asset that's going to not make you want to kill yourself if Justin Jefferson ends up coming back later in the year and balling the hell out. There's a pretty cool tool on Yahoo. I'm looking at it right now. It literally shows you like today what kind of trades have happened with Justin Jefferson in them. And I see a Justin Jefferson straight up for Austin Eckler. I would hit yes for that, in an absolute instant. I'm also seeing him for, Adam Thielen, for Deontay Johnson, for George Pickens, even for Jonathan Taylor. So again, man, with all these trades, it is going to depend on exactly what you're going to be getting there. I guess I'm a little more optimistic he comes back. We don't have any, because for me, like, this isn't that far removed from the Cooper Kupp narrative. And then we found out the Rams were going to be more competitive than we kind of expected, and those went away a little bit. But just in terms of like the severity of the injury, we haven't, at least to my knowledge, heard that this is viewed as more than the 4-week kind of hamstring recovery. Not supposed to be medically a reason to keep him out the whole time. And at that point, man, you just look at the numbers this dude's putting up. Like, for his legacy, won't he want to still go out there? He's still 23, 24 years old. So he's young. If it's a lost season, I get it. So I'm not saying there's a 0% chance, but I just have a hard time believing anyone as good as Justin Jefferson is going to be doing whatever they can to get out there on the football field, even if it is in the midst of a little bit of a lost season. And hey, if you're the Vikings and you really want to make them happy, maybe the time is now to get that deal done.
Yeah, right. To show that you're part of this team until you retire, whatever the terms are. I think that's fair. I think you're right to toss. I'll toss out a couple of more names. So I think you're right that, one end of the spectrum, Austin Eckler, okay, that's simple. On the other end of the spectrum, even Jonathan Taylor at this point, because of what Zach Moss is doing.
Yeah.
I'll put it this way. If you're trading Justin Jefferson, it has to be somebody that you're going to start every week without even pausing. Let me ask, I'm just going to give you knee-jerk reaction. If you have Justin Jefferson, let's say your team's 3-2, you're not quite sure, Justin Jefferson, and you see it in your inbox, you can get Jalen Waddle for Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I'm doing it.
And same thing with Devontae Smith.
Yeah, I'm doing that.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think that's a good place to, DeAndre Hopkins, DeAndre Swift is maybe just a little bit below them, or, but I that's where it starts to get interesting, and you have to really think about it. But I think Waddle and Smith, and alternatively, if you lost Justin Jefferson and you're looking for a buy low candidate that maybe can come close, because Waddle and Smith, they're just like that volcano with the rocks are rumbling down. It's coming. It's coming, right? It's got to be coming. Got to be coming. Let's look at Anthony Richardson. I guess the first thing that I want to ask you about Anthony Richardson is, in general, because I'm getting a couple of these questions already, Ian. Are you advising people to stick it out? And again, we don't know your bench size, we don't know your scoring system, but overall, are you erring on the side of telling people stick it out 4 to 8 weeks? Okay, he's going to come back at some point this year. We saw what he was doing. Because the glass half full, glass half empty. Glass half full, 2 touchdowns in the first 6 minutes of the game. Glass half empty, got knocked out on the second touchdown. This is how it is to have Anthony Richardson. Are you advising people stick it out, hold Anthony Richardson, or are you saying, no, you know what? It's a week-to-week game. You can't wait that many weeks for Anthony Richardson.
ideal world, we can just put him in the IR spots, say hi every single week as we set those lineups,
Yeah,
and then just wait for
yeah.
him to get back. But and this sadly is about the time of year where you start having too many IR spots. So the guys like Mike Williams and Tim Patrick, who you're just trying to get a ring, you finally got to fully kick them to the curb. So apologies, fellas. But with Richardson, man, again, 4 to 8 weeks, that's not exactly pretty. And the problem here too, like having this right shoulder injury, we see as we're running backs a lot of times. And honestly, that Miles Sanders note today that he's missing time with a shoulder injury is very problematic in my opinion, because shoulders and ribs, when you're taking the hits at running backs, and not to slander Anthony Richardson and call him a running back, he has the workload of a running back though on the ground. And to think he's going to come back and be the same version of himself, that's where it is a little bit, again, problematic. Similar to a Kyler Murray, I think, coming back, if he's ever going to come back. My God, haven't heard an update on that in a freaking minute. Would love that, national reporters, instead of just repeating everything the team accounts do. But anyway, with, Richardson and honestly Kyler, to me, similar, but will they be back? Will they not be back? There's a fair amount of concern for both. So if it comes down to like taking a loss and legit not being able to pick up someone that's going to, again, give you a much better chance to win that week, I probably am okay, letting them kick the curb. So ideally, no. But to me, like if we had to do like rest of, say if we're drafting our teams today, like for the rest of the season, just starting from scratch, like I think we'd have a pretty hard time factoring them into the top 20, even given how great his ceiling is when healthy.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think like here, I'll toss you. Let's do data points again. If the only player you could drop, let's say, there are lots of leagues where there's say 5 bench spots. The only player you could drop is Richardson to get Emari Demercado. You even pause.
If I need to start Emari because of bye weeks and stuff, I make that move. If Amari's just going to be sitting on my bench and I'm like hoping he's going to kind of blow up, I don't think I would.
Yeah, I think that's a good caveat. I think that it's similar, and that's why maybe the calculus on the question is a little different if we are talking about Roschon Johnson, like you said, or Jeff Wilson. Yeah. Speaking of Jeff Wilson, let's move to Devin Achane. And it's just, I hated it, Ian. Yeah. But wasn't there something kind of in the symmetry of the universe there? Like, hey, Devin Achane was doing something that basically seemed impossible for 3 weeks. So it's a sign that the universe isn't really broken, and there's always a new Tony. I guess there's so many angles here, and this one is one that could be very fluid. Ian, how likely is it that we're going to talk about all 4 of these running backs before Achane comes back from IR because of their injury histories, and also just because of how good this running game is? It's back to the good old, if you're old enough to remember, kids, Mike Shanahan plug and play backfield, where unheralded running backs, Olandis Gary, Mike Anderson, Reuben Drones, these guys were all Alfred Morris, exactly. Who exactly? So what's the angle here? I had Jeff Wilson. I had him over the Bears backs. I had him over Demercado. I had him over, any running back except the only running back that I thought might be out there is Tyjae Spears that I would weigh just because Wilson's a known quantity. He's coming in fresh. And we saw last year he and Raheem Mostert trade off pretty good weeks in this backfield. Plus, there's Mostert's injury history, but he was pretty good last year. How eager are you to get Wilson? You want to add anything about Salvon Ahmed or Chris Brooks, or just your overall impressions on the Dolphins backfield and whether they're going to be able to produce without Achane the way they were with him?
I don't see anyone walking in and averaging 11.2 yards per touch.
How is it? Rub your eyes, right?
Just pick 2 variables for a running back, put them on the X and Y axis, and whatever they are, I guarantee you in the top right, all by himself is going to be Achane. And that's what's incredible, Sig, because I didn't hear anyone really question like his speed and his big play ability like coming out, but like for anyone to have thought that he was going to be this good, like you'd be, probably admitted to a mental facility, or just be called a drunk or something if you said he was ever going to be this good. This is if he could somehow keep this up, to your point, yeah, he would be breaking the freaking universe. Like, he literally has been putting forward the most efficient, small sample size that we have ever seen at the position.
Ever.
Yeah, it's come on, man, it's absurd. So Raheem Mostert's averaging 5.4 yards per carry, which we would be freaking out about in any other, time zone. But no, he's got Devin Achane just doubling that out there, more or less. So shout out Mostert, man. Second most PPR points in football behind only Christian McCaffrey. That is a real stat in the year 2023. So for me,
as a committee back.
As a committee back, that's the thing. Achane wasn't even getting, like, you were almost proven right if you were like, look, Achane, he's small. Like, he's not going to be able to
12 touches a game.
Yeah, 20. And he's like, yeah, I'm only going to get 12, but 2 of them are going to go for house calls. And, we'll see who's laughing then. So just, again, incredible. Number 1 offense ever in yards the first 5 weeks. Mike McDaniel, take a freaking bow, man. But yeah, Mostert for me, he's a must-start RB1. But if and when Jeff Wilson does get back in the picture, like you said it, they were like rotating games last year. One of them was always a little bit banged up, it seemed like, late in the season. That's what happens in the NFL. And we really only got like their first game together, I think, where Mostert wasn't listed on the injury report. And it turned into a 49 by 47, percent snap split. Yeah. So I do think we could end up seeing probably what we were seeing with Mostert and Achane, splitting things pretty much down the middle. Mostert probably making a little more out of it than Jeff Wilson, just with that big play ability and everything. But no, I think Wilson could legit supply some low-end RB2, borderline RB2 goodness alongside Mostert, keeping on as that RB1. But like, this is what you should be doing with a rushing scheme this good, and it's what Mike Shanahan did, as you brought up. I mean, the Clinton Portis for Champ Bailey trade back in the day, oh my goodness. What I don't understand, though, is how Kyle is alongside that his entire life, and then he just can't stop spending third-round draft picks on running backs, and he trades for Christian McCaffrey, which, don't get me wrong, like, clearly that's showing that things can go to a new level even without him. But, like, seriously, if we took McCaffrey out of that 49ers offense, like, how many fewer points would they really have scored this year, Touchdown, maybe 2, maybe 3. Wild to see that happen. But, hey, obviously working just fine for the 49ers anyway.
Yeah, I really think that what you highlighted there is it's so interesting trying to get into the mind of Kyle Shanahan, because it is his incredible belief in himself that allows his scheme to work so well. I think he probably imparts to someone like Brock Purdy, and I'm glad, Ian, that you took some time out, like, before we just jump into what's the fantasy analysis.
Yeah.
Let's really appreciate what Devin Achane did. And really, it's a Mike McDaniel accomplishment too. And I remember being excited about Achane. I didn't get him in nearly as many dynasty leagues as I wish I would have, because the space that offense creates. You talk about those data points up to the upper right, the good place to be on those plot charts. And that was the number of long pass plays that the Dolphins were able to create last year. And now think about a defense that's spread out like that, and a running back with the shiftiness and acceleration of Devin Achane. And likewise, I think we should say that about the San Francisco offense and what Brock Purdy's doing. What Brock Purdy's doing is just, but it shows what happens whenever there's a quarterback in total alignment with Kyle Shanahan, who really understands how to put defenses at a disadvantage. And Cecil and I were talking about this morning, Ian. It's basically that you want it so that at the moment the ball snapped, that the defenders are thinking, what am I supposed to be doing, right? You show them this motion, you show them the changing formation, so that when the ball snapped, they have to pause for a beat of a second to really make sure they understand their assignment. Because believe me, in fantasy football, when someone blew their assignment, like you mentioned about Jordan Addison. That's the one thing you can't do. But just that moment of hesitation gives them such an edge. But as you said, the flip side of that is Kyle Shanahan is so convinced of his own wisdom that he goes and gets all these players that go by the wayside, because he's so high on his ability to figure these things out.
And Sig, like, what's so crazy, like, again, you're using all this motion. So as a defense, you either need to adjust and just on the fly in that split second against these playmakers on San Francisco or Miami that are already good enough without the benefit of making you think about it, or to just try to prevent those split second decisions. As a coach, you have to simplify everything with your scheme. It's kind of what you see, like, against, quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson and stuff over the year, who present such a rushing threat, and they almost get criticized because it's like, well, teams have to defend their legs, so then they see like an easier coverage scheme, more or less. Like, yeah, that's what they bring to the table and force the opponents to have to do out there. But yeah, man, I mean, I'm looking at the numbers right now. Like the 49ers and Dolphins are the only two offenses in the NFL utilizing some sort of shift or motion before the snap on over 80% of their plays. In third place is the Chiefs. In fourth place is the Rams. In fifth place is the Lions. We're down to 68% now. Like, there's just such a big gap between teams doing this, being incredibly successful doing it. Certainly seems like that's kind of the direction we're moving towards, and maybe that being the biggest, schematic takeaway of this entire season. Hell, we got Bill Belichick pulling it off on the field goal block team now and making everyone that's ever, tried that move and mad and proud.
Yeah, right. Isn't that funny? As I'm frozen, those of you watching us on YouTube, sorry, I don't know how to come back from being frozen, but you can still hear me. So I'm broadcasting with a void. It's a perfect picture for me, Ian, that the rest of the league is like, look at all these wonderful things we can do with offensive football, with all these pre-snap motions and taking advantage of how you can, within the rules, move players around before the snap. And Bill Belichick, look what we can do with that on a field goal. But have you thought about what you could do with a field goal block? Have you thought about that? Yeah. Now we're really cutting edge.
Can you imagine Bill O'Brien knocking on his door like, Bill, we scored like one offensive touchdown in the last 8 quarters. We got some serious problems. And Bill's like, let me show you this field goal block I'm working on right here.
Right. Yeah. What an offense. We'll get that figured out. Let's work on the field goal team. And you met really quickly, going back to Mostert and Wilson. I think that one of the things that maybe we're underestimating the value of a Mostert or a Wilson is how many running backs are there in fantasy football right now that you can really trust. I mean, really, truly trust. Not many. Not as many, especially when, look, I'm just going to step through this really fast. Pittsburgh's on bye. You're not trusting anybody there. Green Bay, I guess Aaron Jones, if his hamstring ever heals. Breece Hall. Okay, there's one. James Cook, probably. I mean, you're probably starting him and you're riding the ups and downs. The same thing with Derrick Henry. Damian Pierce, I don't know if he's there. Indianapolis, what do we have there? Travis Etienne, there's one. Everybody who took Travis Etienne take a victory lap. That pick has been awesome. One. And this offense isn't even really clicking yet.
Kenneth Walker, too. Like, he's worked out great. Walker. And I kicked myself, Sig, because my whole thing, I didn't love Etienne on round 4, it was like, I want to take Kenneth Walker in round 5. I was like, what's the difference? And it's like, stupid Ian, you should have just drafted both of them and laughed straight to the bank. So that's one of my, big takeaways for like next season. And just in general, like and I had some good stuff with the arbitrage picks, but just because you find a cheaper version of what you're looking for doesn't mean that the more expensive version can't be pretty damn great in its own right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, really, I think what you said is sometimes your intuition can be leading you down the right road, but you're just not getting the right message from it. Yeah. If you're like, eat Travis Etienne in the 4th, but I really like Kenneth Walker in the 5th. That doesn't mean don't take Etienne.
Exactly.
Take them both. And and don't worry about your build. What else is going to go 0 running back this year? Who cares? Take the players you like. Take the players you believe in. It's certainly easy to believe in Kenneth Walker. But just to finish out this exercise, right? There's nobody in Baltimore. Joe Mixon's okay. Jerome Ford's okay. There's nobody in Denver. Isaiah Pacheco, there's another hit. Let's take a moment out to say, if you, and in hindsight, why were we all so low on Isaiah Pacheco? Why would the running back who's going to get the most touches in the backfield of one of the best offenses go in the 7th or 8th round? We all collectively, that should have been a smash as much as David Montgomery was a smash. Like, just don't even hesitate. Don't think about it. There's Jacobs, there's Eckler, Brian Robinson. Okay, again, but you're going to ride some ups and downs. DeAndre Swift, now there's another pick to congratulate yourself on. Yeah. Barkley, Pollard, boy, that's crashing and burning. That's not going well at all. We don't trust anyone in Minnesota. Don't trust anyone in Chicago. Alvin Kamara, of course, Bijan Robinson. Even someone like Rashad White. Are you starting him right now? Nobody in Carolina. We don't know if we have anybody in Arizona. Even Kyron Williams, if he keeps putting these games where he has 15, 16 touches for 50, 60 total yards because Cooper Kupp is back. Yeah. So you go down that list. I don't know what the number was, Ian. 12, 14.
It wasn't that high. It wasn't that high.
It's not that high. So if you feel like, hey, every week I can put Mostert in, every week I can put Wilson in, give me half of this backfield, that could be really important to get you through to the playoffs. Really quick, let's touch on the lesser situations and Khalil Herbert. You mentioned Roschon Johnson, And I agree with you. I had Roschon Johnson ahead of D'Onta Foreman, even though D'Onta could get the start this week, depending on Johnson. But I think the coaches were showing us, right, Johnson's got the concussion on Thursday night. But I think the coaches were showing us, even if Johnson wasn't going to play this week, I think he's the better pickup than Foreman. Do you agree?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, we saw the healthy scratches happen for Foreman after, I believe, week 1 when he did get those original backup snaps. So they gave him just a little bit of money in free agency. I know he's been, solid before. It does look like, by the way, Roschon not expecting to practice today. So that's not ideal to start the week with a full DMP and not limited. But we'll see. Could, progress up as the week goes on. So, yeah, man. And just also what Roschon's been able to do. I think the reason for a lot of his support from, the stands in the preseason and everything came down to his pass blocking excellence. So the one thing we do know about Foreman is he is one-dimensional in the way he's been used over the years, whether it be, in Houston, Tennessee, or Carolina. Yeah, he could make a lot happen with those 10 to 15 carries, but we will take, those targets 8 days of the week. And again, I don't think Roschon's going to get blown out of the water in the carry department in the first place. So will it be the 90-10, Roschon show just dominating each and every down? Probably not, but I do think he'll definitely have the, more fantasy-friendly workload out of the group. I just hope this Bears offense can keep on keeping on, man.
Oh, yeah.
My goodness, how quickly the tail has changed on Justin Fields in this passing game over the last 2 weeks. Will it keep up? Probably not, because if it keeps up this high, I mean, we're looking at the freaking overall QB1 the rest of the way things are going. I mean, he hasn't even busted a long touchdown run yet, Sig. I was joking around, like, after that Broncos game, even you could say the same thing about, Washington. Like, if you just showed someone Justin Fields, like, his 30-plus fantasy points, like, your first question would be, wow, like, how cool is his long touchdown run? But he hasn't even done that yet, man. He's airing it out, and it's working.
They're not even using him as a runner by design very often. It is DJ Moore. It is the DJ Moore connection. That's another pick you can pat yourself on the back in victory lap already. It doesn't matter. It was a great pick. Whatever happens from here on out, you were right. It was a great pick. And again, and just like you were saying, Ian, look at how the stories changed. Just like last year. Now, for last year, it was the running that changed his fantasy fortunes and the fortunes of the offense, because the offense was a lot better, even though he wasn't doing a lot of passing. Now it's the passing, and sometimes it's just the schedule. And next week, it's not going to slow down. They get Las Vegas, so that's not going to slow it down, right? And then the Chargers, I'm not afraid of the Chargers. Saints, okay. Carolina, they do get Detroit in weeks 11 and 14. Detroit's a good defense, but they're still Minnesota. Cleveland on the road, probably wouldn't expect a lot of passing in that, but they close. Well, if there's anything that could bring the running back, it's the cold weather. 4 outdoor games: Detroit at home, Cleveland, Arizona, and Atlanta at home, and then Green Bay. Wow, I hope that he has the jersey with the little hand warmers in it, because that's going to be a cold December. Maybe I just made a sell. Yeah, I don't know if it's a sell high Justin Fields take though, because again, he can do it as a runner. It's certainly worked out for us. Let's talk a little bit about other potential buying opportunities or selling opportunities, because again, I've been writing buy low, sell high, I think, for almost as long as I worked at Football Guys. And more, Ian, I spend time on the sell lows and the buy highs than I do on the buy lows and the sell highs. But, players, their value's going up, but it's going to go up more. Or their value's going down, but it's going to go down more. So there's two sides to the coin here when we look at the Dallas offense.
Yeah.
And I think that what's important to remember about the Dallas team, not just the Dallas offense, they were humiliated. Absolutely humiliated. And know this, especially Monday nights, to a lesser extent Thursday nights and Sunday nights, but the league knows, players around the league know, everyone's watching, right? They know on these island games that their peers are watching them, and they got absolutely humiliated, and it's one thing if you're the Denver Broncos, who were already wilting and going into Miami and getting humiliated. It's different when you're the Cowboys. This was a matchup between 2 Super Bowl favorite contenders, and it ends up there was only one Super Bowl favorite or contender. And some of this comes back to Mike McCarthy, who I don't have any faith in at all as a leader or offensive mind. How is he going to respond? But then you hope maybe that Dan Quinn is actually the stronger presence, and we've seen what Dan Quinn's able to do. And then who's the veteran leader on this team, right? Who's the Ray Lewis? Right? Who's the guy that's going to say, we're not going to accept this from ourselves anymore? They already did it once. They had a rough time against Joshua Dobbs, though. So it's like, really, you bounce back from Joshua Dobbs beating you. Maybe that's a problem. Maybe we shouldn't have been surprised at how poorly they played. But for fantasy football, where the rubber meets the road, Ian, is Tony Pollard, massive disappointment. First week he gets the 2 touchdowns, not that efficient. But yeah, the defense did. But week after week, where's the explosiveness?
Yeah.
And then CeeDee Lamb, and of course, because it's Jerry Jones. It's like, well, CeeDee's in a contract year.
I get the tight ends the ball.
Get the tight ends and the running backs the ball. So, do you think that you still have the residue of the very high price that people paid for Pollard and Lamb, and you have distressed teams this week? Maybe this is your chance to pawn them off close to what you paid for them, or do you think it's the opposite? Hey, Dallas they're too good. They're gonna figure that's a Charger. It's gonna be a shootout. It's Kellen Moore revenge game. It's gonna be fine.
That's the thing. If you can sell him for close to what you paid for him, you're selling CeeDee as a wide receiver 1 for another wide receiver 1, or maybe even like, that top 15 option that you just feel really good about, like a Chris Olave or something like that, who you just really think is going to bounce back. Like, I can get behind that, and, Pollard to an extent as well. But like, nothing has changed about the role that we thought these guys were going to have. There has been some incredibly wonky game script with 3, and honestly, it's more or less been 4 of these games, including the loss. Like week 1 against the Giants, and then the Jets game, and the Patriots game, these 49ers games. Like these have all been like 4 touchdown gaps early in the second half, more or less. And because of that, you just really saw the Cowboys completely take their foot off the gas in all facets of the game, obviously embarrassingly so against the 49ers last week. So I don't think that, again, because like going through the ranks and everything, like, yeah, it's been disappointing for Tony Pollard, but I don't know about you, man. It's still really freaking hard to need more than one hand to count the number of running backs that you would probably start ahead of him this week. So I'm with you. The lack of explosiveness has been concerning. I wonder a little more if it has to do with him not being 100% following the offseason, straight line ankle surgery, whatever it is they keep calling those. So, that could be part of it, but also just this offensive line having a lot of problems. I mean, that was one of the notes that Collinsworth and Tirico was making on Sunday night. Just like that Cardinals game, the really big problem was not having the best guard in football in Zach Martin, and I believe their center was out as well. So similar to Houston, I think we could see a better, just in Houston's case, they're already doing pretty damn good, but could see an even better overall product as those offensive lines get healthier and healthier. So they got the Chargers this week on Monday night. We'll see what happens there, but then they get a bye week before they got to go into games against the Rams and the Eagles, and then a couple other probably blowouts. But I think when we see more neutral game script, which again just hasn't really been on the table in more than that Cardinals game this season, we'll see Pollard and CeeDee getting back to, again, something close to where you drafted them to be. Now the overall RB1, maybe overall wide receiver 1, hopes and desires we had for them, probably out the window. But that is, similar sentiment with, Darren Waller over these weeks, where it's like, he's got too much opportunity to really nosedive down the ranks. I don't want to sell him really, because I don't think the value you're going to get is going to be that much better now than if you tried to do it after hopefully 1 or 2 big games in the next couple of weeks. But just in terms of the hope and the upside that we thought was there, that's probably the part where I'm willing to back off.
I think that you bring up a really good point, that none of the games except for the Cardinals game gave us a simulation of what is this Cowboys offense going to look like in a competitive back and forth kind of game. Now, it's not the greatest thing in the world that they scored 16 points and nobody was really a good fantasy play in that game. Maybe Michael Gallup, I guess, or something like that.
And that's sorry, Sig, real quick. Like you mentioned McCarthy. I read this great article from Stephen Ruiz over at the Ringer.
Awesome. Read everything he writes.
Oh yeah. Fantastic. And just he was going through really just speaking to how the 49ers defense just is specifically the Cowboys, like absolute kryptonite on offense. But the note that Stephen made that made me chuckle was like that. He said, like, to call Mike McCarthy's, offense like a high school offense would be like an insult to the creativity of high school coaches.
There's imagination.
Like, it is brutal in there, and that has been the biggest drop off, because going into last week, I think the Cowboys had the most red zone drives in the entire NFL, moving the ball up and down the field, but their execution inside the 20 has been absolutely brutal. Easily number 1 last season at over 70%, but right now just 28th in red zone touchdown percentage at 38%. That's the problem, man. And that was the problem in the Cardinals game. I think they had 1 touchdown and 5 trips. Like, CeeDee and Pollard, their yards are, not too far off the pace, but those lack of touchdowns in an offense that, inexplicably they've scored the 8th most points in the league this year. A lot of help from Michael Parsons and company, but
Right.
yeah, I do think better days will be ahead, albeit probably not overall number one
Yeah.
better days.
Right. Not our hopes. Well, and I think it's a good setup, Ian. It's a good context for this game, because if it's not good against the Chargers, then we might revise a little bit how much of a discount from the original price we're willing to take on these guys. And it is Mike McCarthy, and it is how predictable this offense is. And I feel a little bit, just a little bit, Ian, that maybe Dak Prescott's getting a little discouraged. I feel just a little. Just a little bit. But again, we're watching how is this team going to respond emotionally, spiritually, psychologically to getting a beat down. This Cowboys team is the kind of team that they should never get beaten down, not with the talent that they have. Well, that's what happened. And you mentioned red zone percentage, by the way. I think this is a good point. 5 weeks in, we're more than a third of the way through the fantasy football regular season. And it's 5 weeks, so we have enough to see some trends. And again, which way are you going to play this, right? Well, that's the trend. And even though it didn't match our expectations, we should expect something closer to our expectations to kick in soon enough. Or let people believe that, because that gives you an extended selling opportunity for these players who are riding a negative trend. I think one example of one that people probably aren't even seeing, which is kind of scary in a good way for fantasy football, is how poorly, if you look at that list, you said red zone effectiveness.
Yeah.
Near the bottom of the list also, the Philadelphia Eagles.
That's right.
Huh?
I saw him tied with the Cowboys down there, and I almost said something. That is wild.
So, but what does that mean for DeAndre Swift? Again, I keep mentioning him. What does that mean for Jalen Hurts? What does that mean for Dallas Goedert?
Actually, I have an article out every Tuesday, my Sheesh report, where I kind of break down all the different near misses from the previous week of action. And one of the things I track is ball carriers to get all the way down the 1 yard line, but then do not score a touchdown on the same drive. And DeAndre Swift is the only player with 3 separate instances of that happening this season, like not even on the same drive. So 3 times Swift got all the way down within 3 feet of that goal line, only for Jalen Hurts and, the brotherly shove, as they're calling it now, to get him there across the goal line. So it's a reality. And it's one of the reasons why going into this year, I wasn't, it was one of those things, Sig, where I didn't draft as much Swift as I wanted in like best ball, and then redraft started going on. And all of a sudden I found myself doing it more. So I ended up in a weird kind of middle spot with Swift. Would have wanted more, with hindsight being 2020 and everything. But like my one thing I would push back on with Swift during the offseason was like the Lions are a more fantasy friendly running back offense than the Eagles, even if the Eagles are a better real life offense. And I still think we've seen that play out. What's been great to see that we didn't know, a short month ago, was that Rashad Penny would be a complete non-factor. And that, Kenneth Gainwell would admittedly suffer that rib injury and not really have a chance to build on that starting role he did have in week 1. So I think, as we saw, just the difference between their performance probably would have been a matter of when, not if, Swift was going to take over the starting job anyway. So he's been fantastic out there, not trying to take anything away. But yeah, man, this Eagles offense really last week, and even then, 23 points against the Rams, not the biggest thing to write home about. They just haven't really looked like that same juggernaut. And I think the easy answer is just Shane Steichen leading for the Colts, and them, being a bit slow to adjust under Brian Johnson. But I don't think they're really making things all that difficult for opposing defenses, man. I mean, we talked earlier about just all the great things that motion can do for your offense, getting the matchup you want, or just at a minimum, causing the defense to be confused. And if you do go ahead and look at the bottom of that list, you're going to see a lot of bad teams like the Saints, the Jets, the Broncos, and the Panthers. But in dead last in motion rate is the Philadelphia Eagles. So, hey, they didn't motion much last year either, and it turned out absolutely fine for them. But, that also was an offense that took the league by storm, and I don't think they've added all that much to it. And accordingly, unless this, 4th and 1, you got Kelsey and Hurts, defenses knowing what you're going to be doing every time, it is going to be hard to win out as easily as we've seen in the past. So AJB doing his thing, but, at a minimum, I think it helps explain why someone like Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert for 4 of the 5 weeks of the season have been a little bit slow to consistently provide the numbers we've been hoping for.
Yeah, it's fair. It's all, there's good explanations. That being said, one of the reasons I'm excited and why I think you need to get in on Philadelphia is after this, and maybe you wait for the Jets game. Like, hope the Jets hold them down on the road, because then you got Miami and Washington the next weeks after that. unfortunately, one of the Giants games is week 18, but one of the Giants games is week 16. And you still have some games coming up. This is what's going to be fun. In a row after their bye, Kansas City, Buffalo, and San Francisco, and Dallas, right in a row. Wow.
Geez.
Wow. They're either going to grow two sizes, right? But I could see that hopefully out of the bye, like you said, they're going to look at some of these things. And that's the other thing about bye weeks. We see some reconsidering. Teams can take a breath, they can self-assess, they can self-scout, and they can do some things. I guess, we've covered all the big injuries, and I wanted to make sure to get a couple of these buy low situations out there, like Waddle and Smith and so on, and just the Philly offense in general. I guess
I got a couple more for you.
Yeah, please do. Please.
So, I don't do it every week like you, but I did dive into the streets this one because I thought there were a few situations sticking out. And we mentioned briefly, but what about Dameon Pierce, man? Like, it is one of these things where I think our concerns to start the year were, is this offense just going to be horrific? And could Devin Singletary and to a lesser extent Mike Boone, Dare Ogunbowale carve out, more of a committee role in a new offense? Like, we just can't exactly, just assume Pierce is going to have the same role with a new coaching staff. And like, those kind of came to fruition in the first couple of weeks. He didn't play over 50% of the offensive snaps or anything like that. Last 2 weeks, though, just about at 60%. And last week in particular, man, I think he had every single touch among the running backs. So life hasn't been great, but I think we can rather easily attribute that to the most banged up offensive line in football. They're bottom 7 in yards before contact per carry. And honestly, like, when I see it and you look at, fantasy points below expectation, it's Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, and it's Dameon Pierce. And just based on what I've seen out there, man, trying to watch that film as much as possible, I don't see a completely different running back than last season. I just see his opportunities right now not being that great. So guess what? Saints this week, that's not going to be great. And I guarantee he won't bounce back in week 8 or week 7 because that's their bye. But after that, man, we get the Panthers, the Buccaneers, Bengals, Cardinals, Jaguars, Broncos, and Jets all the way up until week 14. So not, one complete layup after another or anything, but we're talking 3 matchups against bottom 4 defenses. And even, the playoff stretch that, we want to dive into, 2 matchups against the Titans. Zach Moss made that run D look pretty pedestrian. Yeah. And I do wonder if the Titans in late December are going to have all that much to play for in the first place. So just, again, even not getting too into the weeds of the schedule stuff, like, Dameon Pierce is still a running back who I believe is a good football player. His offense is absolutely ascending. And his biggest culprit so far, the offensive line, we do have reason to believe it will get healthier and thus better as the year goes on.
Yeah, and I'll mention the name Bobby Slowick too. I believe if you look in those motion pre-snap charts, the Houston's up there, and he's learned a lot. He's been under Kyle Shanahan, I think, it's almost all of his coaching career. He's learned a lot from Kyle, just like Mike McDaniel. Although there was a time, Cecil would hint at this, but only hint at things that a lot of people around the league thought Mike McDaniel was the genius more than Shanahan, or at the very least, if you're talking about the running game. This was, a few years back. But we're seeing it bear out that you want something with the Shanahan McVay tree, because the McVay tree is really a Shanahan tree anyway. Cecil points that out. Or Ben Johnson or Detroit or Shane Steichen. I do think, and maybe Bobby Slowick is going to get himself onto that list, right? Where we just say, hey, if a player's coming up in this offense, expect them to be able to make something out of whatever they have, because that's what these offenses do. Look what Josh Reynolds is doing in Detroit. Look at David Montgomery in Detroit, as far as how their talents are turning into production because of the way their offensive coordinators are deploying them. I guess I'll give you a chance.
It's incredible in Detroit, man, because that was why I was a little bit down on these Lions. I was like, all right, defense is going to be a heck of a lot better, which has come to fruition. Aiden Hutchinson, my God, even if he's not.
Love it.
Even if he's not in that top tier, with Donald, Micah, and Garrett, he's right beneath him on that, Crosby level at a minimum at this point in time. So absolutely spectacular. Pains me, he ripped my heart out a couple years ago when those damn Wolverines took down the Buckeyes again. But dude is balling balling out there. And just, again, you said it, like Josh Reynolds, Dave Montgomery, guys that were like the butt of jokes on their former team, like in the fantasy community, like no less than 12 freaking months ago, at least for Montgomery, man, like just seeing them so easily go out there. And I mean, it's a testament to, you know, everything that Ben Johnson's done, and also a testament to what having a big badass offensive line can do for everyone involved. So yeah, man, like just, I had a very hard time looking at this passing game and saying like, all right, you know, really is Sam Laporta, even if he's good, going to come in and just being your number two pass game option is a rookie tight end, like that's going to go well? Yeah, it's going great, actually. They're a top, 6 scoring offense. So all the credit in the world to them, man. It's tough kind of riding that line between like what matters more, the Jims and Joes or the X's and O's. But, you know, Dallas versus Detroit, I think is a very good example of, I think the Cowboys objectively having more overall talent on their offense. But look how much further it's going in Detroit right now.
Yeah, doing more with less, doing less with more. And Detroit and what they've been doing with their offense, I think – Ian, I think the simplest way to encapsulate it is remember how Jared Goff was viewed in the football circles at the time they traded for him. A lot of people speculating that the second first-round pick was a throw-in for taking Jared Goff's contract, right?
Yeah.
Now the question is, were they going to give him a second contract? Should they take a quarterback? Should they try to get a different quarterback to be their quarterback? Or is Jared Goff the guy? Just like the same way that Brock Purdy is the guy, right? You just need someone who can execute the scheme. The scheme is where you win. The execution, not all the kinds of amazing, you throw a ball 80 yards and so on. No, you just need to execute. Love the Lions. Love what they're doing, and love that we can actually say they are a good team. I don't want to bloom them. They're a good team. It's always good to spend time with Ian Hartitz for the wonderful off the rails and the positive energy. And I guess at this time, you know, you mentioned Ohio State, Michigan football, and also Aiden Hutchinson, since you mentioned him. He is already here's how I'll rate Aiden Hutchinson, Ian. There are a handful of defensive players that while you're watching football, because we're all fantasy obsessed, you can just watch that guy and be completely entertained, right? Just you get fired up. Like JJ Watt was like this. Like just watch this guy on his snaps. Lawrence Taylor, you know, like this kind of defensive player. That's Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, when you watch him, he's influencing the play. Oftentimes that it's not showing up on the stat sheet. He is still influencing the game. And you love that the way this lined up. Thanks, Trent Baalke, for taking Travon Walker. So it's over here in New Orleans, down here in New Orleans, the weather, the heat finally broke. It's actually under 70 degrees. I think it's going to rain. It's fall. You know, that's football. That's fall. Other than football and college football and watching football on Thanksgiving and all that, when you think of fall and the seasons change. What does fall mean to you, Ian Hartitz?
Well, you just took away all the things it means.
Football. Well, what's left?
I don't know, man. Like, what else do you need here? But I will say, like,
Halloween.
There is that when you walk outside in your t-shirt and shorts, and then you feel that crisp breeze, and you're like, it's time for a hoodie. It's hoodie weather, baby.
Hoodie weather.
That's just such.
Do you have a hoodie collection? Do you have like more than one hoodie?
Oh, I got like 20 hoodies. I don't know. Yeah.
So what is the line? How does a hoodie make it into your collection?
Just however, man. I have a beautiful New Orleans hoodie. What I've been doing recently is like I almost just buy a hoodie like when I'm cold enough and like I kind of need one, and then you just kind of get it in the spur of the moment thing. So I don't know. I've ordered some. I got a neon one for my guy Cordero Patterson that's got his logo on it. Cool little CP that also looks like an 8-4. So got to rock with my guys there. But no, I do believe fall. Easily the best season. Like shout out to I guess San Diego having their like 75-degree weather all night long. But if I really just had to pick like a temperature, you know, if you had like a 15-degree temperature range or whatever that you would just be forced to have all year long, like something in that like 55 to 70, you know, 50 to 65 range would probably be my best pull with it. But I don't know, man, just something about walking around, hearing the high school football band get going on Friday nights if you're around the stadium. It does make me just happier on a day-to-day basis. I get a similar mood, in Christmas, really close to the time where you just, I don't know if it's just good memories from my childhood and all that stuff, but it's a great day to be great, especially so in the fall season.
Yeah, it is. I love the hoodie talk. I've got I've only got like 4 or 5. My wife,
You're
my
in
wife
New
can't.
Orleans, though. I'm in
I
Ohio. I
know.
need them.
I know I could use them for a lot more. We were out at a Hare Krishna farm here this weekend, and it was like the cow festival because cows, right? They had the
Of
top of
course.
the pyramid in Indian culture is a cow, and I can tell you from going to India that like if the cows roam free, they just do whatever they want,
Huh.
and then even in the cities, and if a cow comes and sits down in the road, then the traffic stops, and the
Oh
traffic
my
starts
gosh.
again when the cow decides to get up and move. And we were out at the cow festival, and they had these wonderful robes. They were kind of like bathrobes, but they were bigger. They had all kinds of cool mystical designs on them. They were Turkish. But I was like, in New Orleans, I don't ever wear a bathrobe.
Right.
I can't get one. But I do have like 4 or 5 hoodies. Um, uh, but you're right. When you live somewhere with the fall climb where you need it and you find yourself, ooh, I'm cold right away. You need those hoodies. And you mentioned Cordell Patterson, and I think I swear that when he was in college, there was some talk of like he has a fashion design angle, like he's into fashion design. He's a great dude. If you ever
Yeah,
see any
man.
Cordero Patterson quotes or you hear his perspective on things, he's a great dude. So I'd love that you mentioned his clothing line and supporting him. And he's one of those guys that I was so pleased that he finally mattered in fantasy football, and his talents were finally translating to the production for us to care about because he's a good football player. It was just the coach's fault, not
Oh
his
yeah.
fault that he didn't matter before that.
I've been
Ooh,
hyping him up for such a long time, and dude, he even I think at the end of last year, maybe end of 2021, he shot me like a DM, just like, "Hey man, thanks for all the support.
yeah,
Nothing more, nothing less, but just
sure,
complete cool, dude." And yeah, like you'll see, a couple videos a year of just like some goofiness, him playing catch with a fan in the
right.
pregame, or to your point, just being a character on the mic, and just like look at him this year, man, like listed as like the starting joker on the depth chart. Sure sounds like he probably thought he was going to have a bigger role than he was going to. And, playing through injuries and just that hasn't come to fruition. And you have not heard a peep out of the guy. So always out there, in March, he's like trying to, just recruit people on Twitter and doing all that nonsense as well. So CPAT, man, all-time kick return touchdown leader. Sig, we
Mm-hmm.
talk about like MLB records that will never be broken just because of how
Mm-hmm.
much the game's
Mm-hmm.
changed. Like, if we do want to talk about football records that will never be broken, I think CPAT's kick return touchdown record has got to be up there near the top, man. I'm sure we can find some better ones, maybe like, a real high efficiency average back in, the day when like you just weren't gonna, you're not gonna be able to replicate that now. But some of these special teams, man, the way the game is going, yeah, sign me up for CPAT. Unless they actually, have you seen the proposal for like the USFL kickoff they want to maybe do?
Ooh, tell me, enlighten me.
They did this, and it was very entertaining there. It created a lot of big plays, but they basically have the kickoff team, other than the kicker kicks off in the usual spot. Everyone else is lined up on the opposite 30-yard line, and then 5 yards across from them is the kick return team. So they're pretty
Ooh.
much lined up 5 yards
Mm-hmm.
away from each other. So you're taking away the huge run up and collision, but they're all the way down on like the 30-yard line. The kicker kicks it. Once the kick returner catches it, ref blows his whistle and everyone goes. So it worked in the
Oh,
USFL. There's almost so
wow.
much open space. I wonder if it'd lead to too many big plays in the NFL. So it'd be a lot of fun from that perspective, but that would be the way how they get CPAT's record. So I almost hope for CPAT's sake they don't go to that, but we'd see a lot more big plays, man.
Yeah, or maybe you can do a modified approach, Ian, and just in overtime. That's the kickoff. That's how you do
Yeah.
the kickoff in
Okay.
overtime, right?
I'm down for that.
Something like that, and each team gets a possession. That sounds like fun, though. And you're right, the game is changing, and in some ways, it's sad. I mean, I know we talk about player safety. Come on, am
I
I
know.
breaking a taboo if I say the NFL doesn't actually care about player safety?
Well, it's one of those
But
things, man. Like, okay, if you really, really, in your heart of hearts, only cared about safety, guess what? You shouldn't be playing football. It's the same thing, when you
yes,
hear about like boxers and people like, how much should they spar and stuff. Like, if you're doing a sport that involves flying around with a helmet
right,
on your head with 11 other guys in the field, like it is a contact sport for a reason. Just like with
right,
gambling, man. Like, you know what a responsible amount to gamble is? Nothing, because
0,
you're gonna
right.
lose money with it. But we like doing it anyway because it's like having some fun. So again, like I don't think it's anyone's right to tell people they can't play football, but yeah, it is football at the end of the day, man. So I'm not saying we need to go back to 2010, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, dudes getting freaking sent off the field every other play after some, helmet to helmet blow. But just the, some of the roughing and the unnecessary roughness penalties are just a disgrace, man.
It is. Well, and so like somebody asked, because we saw out of training camp all of those shots with the pads, the concussion padding.
Yeah.
Why don't they just play with that in the game? What reason is there? I mean,
aesthetic, I guess. That's the only thing I can think of, which is not a good reason.
Logos on it. Yeah, right. It isn't a good reason. So I'll just say this. I'll end this conversation on this note, because it's about player safety. Okay. But what is more pure football than a guy with the ball and having to make all 11 other guys miss? Like what Cordero Patterson did to establish that record, where you catch the ball and they're all coming for you. And what can you do? That's pure football. I mean, that's like how we played as kids. Sometimes there was a game that the name is now outmoded.
I can't say the name.
Yeah. That was the game. That was the essence of the game, and that was where a lot of us that got your football juices flowing. Just
King of the Hills, another one, like more
sure.
Simply. Yeah, man.
It's all right, and it's certainly all right to get to riff on Cordero Patterson. It's always great to get to riff with Ian Hartitz, Fantasy Life, and he mentioned Dwayne McFarland. These guys are great. They're what makes our fantasy football world great, and it's great to be part of it because you get to hang out with them, just like we get to hang out with you, which is always the best because you're so classy.